Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, the home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. So glad you're here today. With me as always, Jack Fairchilds. Jack, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Chris.
All right, well, getting right to the point today. There's so much to talk about, particularly with the culture wars, and trying to understand how did we get from point A to point B, and why it is it appears that we're losing in most instances. It's important to note that in my political career, I've been known for a few things, I suppose. One is getting my teeth kicked in by the establishment from time to time. But I think others saw some of that as a bit of impatience, politically speaking. I can't tell you how many times I was told just to wait, just to relax, to get in line, wait your turn. But anyone who studies the calculus here, just the parameters, the data of the social sciences occurring, recognizes that we don't have much time left. I think anyone who recognizes not only the rise of extremism in the Democratic Party, but also the destabilization of the institutions, we begin to recognize that we have to strike now or never. One of the big things that always concerned me, and I know this is such a problem for most people, is the national debt. It's a very clear indication of the size and scope of the federal government, but also the government's irresponsibility. When I was running for U.S. Senate in 2014, a race that we rightfully won, the debt was roughly around $16 to $17 trillion. That was 10 years ago. It's $34 trillion now with no end in sight. Let's put that in perspective. A government is known by the amount of money it takes in, by the amount of money it spends. That is the size and strength of said government. As limited government conservatives, our position's always been that we have to find ways to reduce spending. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. We have sounded the alarm bell. We have screamed bloody murder. We have ran direct campaigns on it. The Republican Party is guilty of misspending. The Democrats are guilty of misspending. It's in that one arena that the parties really are more alike than they are dissimilar. No one seems to recognize the very real danger of a big, expansive, dangerous federal government. A federal government that has shown us time and time again it's going to miscalculate and mismanage everything it touches. And yet we seem to spend the same amount of time electing the same old people to keep electing and making the same mistakes over and over and over again. It's perplexing to me, and it always has been, because we told you these days were coming. We told you it was unsustainable, and now we're right on the cusp of spending more money just to service the debt. You know what debt service is, right? Jack, do you know what debt service is?
Yeah.
Does anybody know what that means? I don't know if we know anymore. I'm not sure we teach that in schools any longer.
I don't think we do.
Let me see if I can summarize it simply. If you finance something, you're going to owe more at the end than you actually finance. The reason for that is there's an interest rate there, and that applies to the end payment. Well, there's a rate, an interest rate to these bonds and other instruments that are being utilized to fund our government. The government has to pay these things out. What if I told you the debt is so big, it's so large, just the interest alone to service the debt will be more than the entire national defense budget next year? You know, we already spend more money than any other country in the world on defense, and yet just to service the debt is going to be larger than the defense budget. Now, here's what's going to happen. You people, being so preoccupied with electing the same nitwits time and time again, have made it possible for the government to grow more than ever envisioned. It's on auto drive now. These idiots in Washington don't even vote on bills anymore. It's just absolute rubber stamping omnibus spending bills and continuing spending resolutions over and over and over again. No end in sight. The unfunded liabilities are probably closer to $200 trillion. I'm going to tell you right now, like I told you in 14, the end is near. You think this can continue? You think investors are going to see this as a safe investment as we grow well beyond our gross domestic product? You think that's really allowable? It seems Washington doesn't care. They haven't changed a thing. Doesn't matter what party's in charge. And so you wonder why we're getting frustrated. I can tell you right now, our children will not inherit the same country that we inherited. Far, far worse, because our country is an extension of our economic might. Our military is an extension of our economic might. You do know that, right? For some reason, we think we create super soldiers. Just by virtue of being born in America makes us great fighters. What makes us great fighters is a great economy that backs up the military industry. That economy is crumbling. Now, right now, It's on artificial life support because we're keeping that stock market inflated, right? Everything's fine,
Yeah.
right? Nothing to fear. It looks like their retirements are going to be fine. Inflation's getting to be a real issue. But more importantly, just the amount of money it takes to serve this government is going to be, at some point, more than we can bear. So how do you handle this massive debt? You increase taxes, right?
Yep.
It's funny, the Democrats, that's what they argue. They claim the reason we have so much debt is because of the Trump tax cuts. No, the reason we have so much debt is you idiots can't stop spending in Washington, D.C. Both parties are guilty of that. Now, I'm pounding on the debt as a greater example of the real problem here because that's just one element of the problem. The other problem is this. We're losing because the culture is dying. We keep hearing this term culture wars. The culture is dying, or at least the old American culture is. The values that we were taught, that our grandparents were taught, those values are disappearing. And how do we know this? This is not me speculating. There's polling that's been done recently that shows this great divide in the American political system between Democrats and Republicans. Now here's the question. If I were to ask you, for instance, how did this great divide get created? I mean, there seems to be big differences now between the parties.
Big time.
In some respects, but there's a big divide. There's a big divide. Now the problem is the Republicans seem to want to trickle toward the Democrat side. As Democrats grow in power, and even in radicalism, it seems we chase them to the left. Have you noticed that?
I have.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we chase them to the left because we lack the conviction to say, stop. We lack the courage to say, stop. So we elect these weak people like we have in the Mississippi Senate and the U.S. Senate, and they'll go right along to get along with the Democrats so long as they keep their little fancy positions. You know who these people are. They got sugar in their tanks. You know who they are.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm gonna name names one of these days. They know it's coming. I can't wait for them to try a statewide race one day. Cannot wait for it. But we have a situation here where as long as they're holding a seat, they'll reach across the aisle, they'll dance the dance with the Democrats. Here's what the data is showing, though. There is a gulf. There's a real split, but it's not the Republicans causing it. The splits come in because the Democrats are radicalized. These numbers are shocking. So Gallup is usually a fairly accurate pollster, perhaps not in races, but in other matters, right? And their polling is finding that there is a division occurring. And there's a balance that's being threatened. But it's because, listen to this quote, Democrats are moving much further left than Republicans are moving right. Think about that. Republicans find themselves static, refusing to fight, static, refusing to defend the old ways. The Democrats are shifting aggressively to the left, and the data shows that. Now, I'm going to get to the greater point here in a minute. I want to share some of this data. The data is really, really shocking. So, if you're going to identify, Jack, as a liberal or conservative, and people have done this for years, I think it would be safe to say that you're a conservative.
Absolutely.
And that's based on standardized, objective data. In other words, positions that you hold and the party is supposed to hold. But what happens when those positions become uncool? What happens when conservative thought becomes uncool, especially to young people? The shift begins, and that's where that shift is beginning. In 2004, Jack, listen to this. In 2004, 39% of Democrats described their views on social issues as liberal or very liberal. Let it sink in. That's just 39% 20 years ago said they were liberal or very liberal. That number now, 69%. Come on now.
Wow.
That is a seismic shift in the way a party views itself. But more specifically, as people in the party view themselves. And so it begs the question, how on earth in 20 years did it shift that greatly? Well, it's becoming cool to be a radical. It's becoming cool to be a socialist. And we're losing the culture war, and so we're seeing this massive shift. You can blame whoever you want to blame. You can blame academia. You can blame the high schools, public education, Hollywood, the news. But ultimately, if the Republicans in Washington and in the state capitals had actually stood their ground the way they claim they're supposed to stand their ground, none of this would have occurred because people would have seen the other side not just being bombastic, but holding the line with good policy and teaching the next generation that good conservative policy is the answer to prosperity. That's not what we've got here. We're losing this battle. How badly? The Democrats now radically shifting toward liberalism. Republicans, on the other hand, just barely clicked over to the conservative side over 20 years. In other words, you see a very static, still Republican Party who basically identifies as conservative the same way they did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The Democrats, liberal, almost twice the numbers than they did just 20 years ago. The whole issue is shifting, And that should be very, very alarming. So what do you do?
That's a good question. I mean, we've seen this divide, and we've seen where one sect is definitely going more extreme when it comes to the Democrats. I think Republican Party needs to get back to its base. I mean, it needs to get back to its platform, because for the longest time, all the platform is, anything the Republican Party ever does is lip service. They don't show you what true conservatism is, and they let the media define what conservatism is.
Let's keep sharing some of this data, and we'll sum it up here in a second. There's a progressive blogger out there. His name is Kevin Drum, and he is a hardcore progressive. I hate the word progressive. Let's just call it what he is. He's a liberal with socialist tendencies.
Yeah.
And he looked at this data and other data since 2001, and he concluded that while Republicans have shifted right slightly, Democrats had gone left much, much harder. And he said progressives have been bragging publicly about pushing the Democratic Party leftward since 2004, and they've succeeded. Democrats have been moving further and further away from the median voter for years. Of course, that median voter, that moderate voter, is a much smaller fraction of the electorate, so Democrats are having election successes. On issues involving immigration, abortion, same-sex marriage, guns, and taxes, Democrats drifting strongly toward the liberal position, and Republicans, not really doing anything. Among Republicans, and this is fascinating, this number right here is actually pretty shocking to me.
I want to hear it.
There are we can allege, or at least he alleges, there are extreme views on abortion. Okay, I get that. One extreme view, according to the author, would be abortion never. Never. That's an extreme view. I think anybody would agree that if a woman's health is in danger, that is her life is in danger, then there would be an exception. But the extreme view would say never, under any circumstances. Liberals, their extreme view is always, under whatever circumstances. In other words, if you want an abortion at 1 day in conception or 8.5 months in conception, that's the extreme view. So they tested that single issue theory. Among Republicans, that extreme view has gone up on about 2 points. Democrats, their extreme view, up by 20 points.
Wow.
We're losing. And it's the young people driving this wedge. The end is near. You can sense it. That's why you feel so much unrest. Whether it's economically, fiscally, or just the culture as a whole, we're being lambasted because of the cowards in our party and their inability to stand and do the right thing, because they were so concerned about lobbyists and so concerned about country clubs and so concerned about the free football tickets and the cocktail parties, they couldn't do what they had to do because they were afraid of offending people. Now, you think these leftists are afraid of offending anybody?
Not even remotely.
And they're showing it. It used to be somewhat of a stigma, even in the Democratic Party, to call yourself a liberal.
Yeah.
It's not a stigma now, is it?
It's a badge of honor.
Proudly. That's the distinction. We try to pacify them. They try to crush us. We try to justify using the term conservative. You know, you've heard these words. I'm a compassionate conservative.
Oh, I hate putting it in
I'm a kind conservative. Why? Why? You lack the backbone to fight, you people with sugar in your tanks. You know who you are. You know who you are. The day's coming. You're all the same. You'll do anything for an office. You'll say what you have to say. You'll lie to the people. You'll raise the money. You'll let the lobbyists scratch your backs. You'll do whatever it takes to raise enough money to fool enough people to make them believe you're a conservative. Then you betray them time and time and time again. And it is the very message for the last 20 years that we've seen. And it's just time for it to stop. If it doesn't stop, the end result's going to be devastating, because according to this data, it's just a number of years before they have entrenched themselves so exclusively in the mind of the public that being a conservative will be like a moderate then, in 20 years from now. I guess that's the real concern, right? I mean, think about it. If I hold traditional views 20 years from this very moment, what would that make me 20 years from now? Right? Probably radical. Probably a lunatic.
You would be far-right conservative.
I guess that's what they call us now. And what does that far-right conservatism look like? It means I value individuals. It means I value upward mobility and prosperity for everyone. It means the Constitution says what it says, it means what it says, and that our end result of all government should be to secure our liberty no matter what. That doesn't sound like radicalism to me, but it's being defined that way. Boy, we are in a cultural war, and we're losing. Meanwhile, y'all keep electing these same people. It's not the politicians' fault. They're just playing the game. It's the voters' fault. They're the ones causing this.
Yeah, because I mean, they're telling you who they are. They have a voting record. You can look this up, as a matter of fact, and see if your politician is doing what they told you they're going to do.
But
you
Jack,
don't want to.
No. He came by the house and had a cup of tea with me, and he was such a nice young man. Had that lisp in his voice, but he was a nice young man.
You know,
and that's what. Or
that's the problem.
I went fishing with his papa, or he taught me Sunday school in 1961. Meanwhile, the country's on fire, and you're doing nothing to stop it.
It's insane, and that's what we have to get away from, because too many people want to sit back and they want to hold these people to not to a standard, because obviously they don't care what the standard, but they want to look at them in a different light because they were willing to come to their meeting or they were willing to come by their house. They're playing you, and that's what they don't understand. That's what they're not comprehending.
Well,
they're being played.
What's crazy is it's literally like you get a scam email. I don't know about you guys, but I've been getting emails for about 6 months now that I've ordered some massive computer security package from Norton, right? And I owe like $500, and I have to call this number if it's inaccurate. And if I call the number, they're going to want my information.
Yeah.
And I know that's a scam, but it's like some of these old folks can't figure out they're being scammed almost daily by politicians.
That's true.
And maybe it's the same ones that would pay this guy in India to get that Norton thing fixed for $75 extra, right? But they're getting scammed, and it's almost insulting. No, it is insulting. You're allowing yourself to get played by politicians and talking points and cool little commercials on TV, and meanwhile the country continues down this same path. And all we're asking is for people to stand and fight. And the ones that do stand and fight, they're not victimized, they're villainized. They're villainized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, speaking of villains, Louisiana. I don't mind what they did here. I think it's outstanding. They are now the first state to require the 10 Commandments to be posted in public school classrooms. And I realize this is going to cause the left to go apocalyptic. I get that. And I realize that nobody in this world can live up to those commandments perfectly. The left likes to point that out.
Oh, they love
You
it.
hypocrites. Yes, everybody has problems with sin. That's the nature of salvation. Everybody has problems with sin. We recognize that. Nobody's perfect. But to point out or to allow a historical document, I don't think anybody would argue it's not a historical document, would they?
No.
It's the basic building blocks of Judaism and many of our laws. Furthermore, it's probably been the most impactful document in the history of this country outside of the Constitution and the Bible itself. And yet it's not overtly religious in the sense that it seeks to bring salvation. It's a set of rules, a set of commandments, and it's on the wall. Historically appropriate, I think. I don't see a constitutional challenge here. I know they're going to try to make the constitutional challenge. It's going to be sued, and apparently the governor of Louisiana is saying, bring it on, let's do this right now. But in this modern Supreme Court, they're going to take a big L.
Yeah.
Because this modern Supreme Court is going to point out this is a historical document, and if the people of that state want to place it up there, as long as you're not forcing that religion on somebody, there's no constitutional violation. Now let me be clear about something. No conservative wants religion forced. That's a misnomer. If you believe that, you have no idea what conservatism is. We're not here to pass laws to make you worship God. We're not here to pass laws to force you to do X, Y, and Z. To me, that's an anti-conservative position because it seeks control using the force of government. However, we do recognize the value of some of these belief systems. And just for example, thou shalt not lie. A pretty good lesson for a classroom. Thou shalt not lie.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people don't lie. I'm not saying nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. But at the same time, a good basic set of lessons for a classroom, right? And not overtly religious in the sense that you must do it. You're not being told you have to or you'll fail. The state has balance just by placing the placard in the room. Now, here's something else that's mind-boggling. The leftists are going berserk about this. Okay, I get it, but you don't seem to mind when your philosophies are taught in classrooms.
Nope.
You think that's perfectly acceptable. Well, if you're going to have radicalism in the textbooks, how about have some historical context on the wall of the classroom?
Well, here's the other point, Chris. I mean, it's just being put on the wall, correct? Nobody's telling any of these kids they have to read it.
They don't have to.
It's just sitting up there on the wall. to me, this goes back to what you were just talking about. This is what we're craving. We want to see Republicans take stances and fight for something. And it feels like, at least in Louisiana, they're willing to stand and fight.
Let's give them credit for that. Let's say that at least they did something there. But here's another potential issue here. A lot of politicians will throw out this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's compelling. And they say, look what I've done. I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
Then the rest of their voting record is absolute abysmal.
Yep.
It's absolute junk. Fiscally, junk. Control of government, junk. Loss of civil liberties, junk.
That's
but
fair.
I put the 10 Commandments on the wall. That's another trap for us. We have to be aware that just because Louisiana's done this, there's still a whole lot more that can be done.
Yep.
This is one of those things you see, and it makes the news, and everybody's pounding their chest, but actually, there's a lot of other issues just as important. Don't get me wrong, the 10 Commandments is important, but there's a lot of other issues from the conservative perspective that Louisiana probably should get focused on.
I agree.
And I'm hoping they're trending that direction. Now look, I don't understand the friction unless the left truly is anti-religious. And one would think in a country that bases itself on pluralism and diversity that this is exactly the kind of diversity a classroom needs, isn't it?
It should be.
I've been hearing about the values of diversity for 60 years now. This is another element of diversity, is it not?
It feels like it is. I
say we celebrate diversity of the American left. Look, we've tried it the left's way.
Yeah.
We've tried it their way, and we've told God he's not welcome in public schools, and we've allowed them to basically make morality whatever they want to make it is. And again, we're not perfect. We're not saying be perfect, but there is at least some degree of objective right and wrong. C.S. Lewis certainly thought that was the case.
Yes.
The left doesn't think that. They just want to use education to brainwash kids and to have them pop out and become little active elements and pieces of the state, pieces of the government to be utilized at whim. It's typical socialism writ large. And then Louisiana does one little thing, and the whole world goes crazy. I think, though, it's a good point, though, to make that we have to move beyond the talking points. And I think we can move beyond the talking points if we, A, make sure our elected officials govern the way they claim they're going to govern, and B, quit all the drama. You know what I'm talking about by drama?
I think so, but can you elaborate, be sure?
I can. It seems here lately, in Washington especially, hearings. And that's all they're doing. They're holding hearings. And here's what's fascinating. All the hearings are orchestrated based on who controls the House or who controls the Senate, right? If the Republicans control the House, you're going to have Republican chairs, and they're going to have an orchestrated hearing. The Democrats control the Senate, you're going to have Democrat chairs, and they're going to have orchestrated hearings. Nobody up there is seeking answers. They're seeking sound bites.
They are.
Everybody there has a hearing, and one of the best things to ever happen and one of the worst things to ever happen, we're putting cameras in front of these idiots' faces.
Yep.
Because it all became about circus and politics at that stage. And I wrote the other day, I was talking about the Rome when it began to decay. And the citizens of Rome, which used to be, they aspired for nobility and aspired to do things that were ethical for the most part. Again, no perfect people. There's always been ups and downs in society. But as it decayed, there had to be ways to demonstrate and to deceive. And the best way they could find to demonstrate and deceive was through bread, free bread, and circuses. The gladiator games, bread and circuses. And by doing that, they kept the people distracted. All hell's breaking loose. The water's not running like it's supposed to. Clearly the barbarians are literally at the gate. We're losing battles across the empire. It's okay, here's some bread. It's okay, here's a circus. This seems eerily like Rome. This is a circus. I see them up there asking these very pointed questions. They're not trying to get answers. They're trying to make Fox News. And the Democrats, you're not trying to get answers. You're trying to make CNN News. And so the cameras are there, and they're going through all these machinations and all this acting. And then you ask yourself, okay, cool. At the end of the year, what did you do? And the answer is, not a doggone thing. We had hearings.
That's exactly.
We had hearings. We didn't pass any bills.
No.
We couldn't have agreed on a budget. But by George, we had 36 hearings. That, and you say, well, what happened in the hearings? Really nothing outside of the fact we asked some really dumb questions and tried to get some giggles out of people.
We got great sound bites.
Got some
That's
good
what we
sound
got.
bites. And maybe AOC fights Marjorie Greene or something like that. Let's put this to a test. I think a pay-per-view event with those guys fighting MMA would be an outstanding way to solve part of the debt problem.
I think I would buy that pay-per-view.
It's silly because we're so focused on talking points. And we're so focused on just trying to look like we're doing something, ultimately doing absolutely nothing. The trend continues. The country keeps shifting to the left, right?
Yes.
All right, that's where we are. How about some ideas outside of just talking points? Because here's what I do know. Washington, D.C., let me just say it, the federal government is embarrassing.
Very much so.
And it has been for a long time. The federal government's policies, Washington, D.C.'s policies have destroyed the lives of millions, not only in this country but overseas. And then they argue that's democracy. They don't even know what the form of government we have is. The Democrats especially, clearly a republic, but they claim it's a democracy. But these are wastelands they've created, both domestically and in foreign countries. The ruling class in Washington, that elite ruling class that sits in the country clubs and the capital clubs there in Washington and looks down at noses at flyover territories like Mississippi and Alabama and others. They sit there with these policies. But let's judge the policies. Then we'll do a commercial. But let's judge the policies over the last 30 or 40 years. America's cities filled with homeless people, smash and grab gangs. City streets are unchecked, criminals selling drugs and trafficking children, assaulting the elderly and the innocent. The inner cities are almost unlivable. This is your federal government. These are the result of policies that those people thought would work because theoretically it sounded wonderful. The Great Society, war on poverty, theoretically sounded really good. But in practice, what has occurred except the devastation of the inner cities, the devastation of our cities as a whole? Right now, because of government policies, inflation. Inflation is destroying the middle class. Inflation is destroying the bank accounts of people that actually worked hard to save. The border being overwhelmed, the middle class struggling. There are more illegal immigrants here than we can count now. American society has become fragile. Its culture is fragile. The economy is fragile. We don't have the jobs we need. We have more people not working than at any other point in our country's history. And yet these knuckleheads claim a 4.3% unemployment rate. No, people are choosing to sit home. It's broken. This is the federal government writ large. There are failures. It's run by failures. These aren't celebrities, Jack. I can't stand the fact that we've made these politicians celebrities. These are the lowest class of humanity we have serving right now.
And that's part of the reason they want to run. It's not to represent you. It's because they see they can become a celebrity.
Yeah, and they do. It must be nice getting those free steaks, those free ball game tickets, especially back home you would be unemployable. That's half the politicians I know. You put them in the free market, unemployable. Did you know who I'm talking about?
I do. That's why I'm laughing.
And then they got a good smile, or their daddy was rich, and the next thing you know, they're a congressman in By George. They're not doing a darn thing, but they're living the high life, or making you think they are. But we're fighting for you, Jack. We're fighting for you.
I'm good. I don't need you to fight for me. I just need you to do the right thing.
Before I go further as to actual sound policy examples as to what should be done, why don't you give our sponsors a thanks real quick?
All right. Well, this year has come with a lot of uncertainties. Will red-hot inflation continue? Will interest rates continue to soar? How can the Fed promise a soft landing when all signs point to another serious recession? If the beginning of this year has shown us one thing, inflation is not slowing down, and the Fed is completely incapable of fixing these issues. Like millions of other Americans, I've found myself asking, how am I going to protect myself and my family? That's why we at the Midnight Ride Network spoke to the folks at Genesis Gold Group, our new platform partner for the Midnight Ride. They walked us through how we can protect our savings with real physical gold and silver. Genesis makes it easy to convert your 401k or your IRA into a retirement account backed by precious metals like gold and silver. Genesis Gold Group has decades of experience helping folks just like you preserve your hard-earned savings, and the service provided to their clients is truly one of a kind. Call Genesis Gold today at 800-200-GOLD for a no-commitment informative consultation with one of their experts to find out if Genesis Gold can be a fit for you. That's 800-200-4653 or visit them at midnightridegold.com. And when it comes to protecting you and your family's future, I'm excited to share with you another one of the Midnight Ride's new sponsors, Prepper Beef. Prepper Beef offers a range of freeze-dried beef in freezer boxes with steaks and roast made from high-quality, all-American cattle. These products are made to last for up to 20 years, ensuring you have access to premium beef for decades to come. By supporting Prepper Beef, you're not just buying beef, you're supporting American ranchers, values, and your family. Join us in our mission to eat well today and eat well tomorrow. Visit midnightridebeef.com and stock up for the future today.
I want to thank those sponsors. They make this show possible, so if you could help them out, we really would appreciate that. Now, earlier I was complaining about do-nothing politicians in Washington, and I think that's a pretty accurate assessment.
Very accurate.
I think it is. There are a handful of things here I saw that was suggested, and I think we should consider it. Let's just say if we had a wish list of things to do in Washington. Number one, in my mind, secure the borders.
Makes sense.
And that's not too difficult to do. A country without borders can't claim itself to be a country. I don't think anybody was arguing there shouldn't be a reasonable process by which good folks can come be Americans, but this process right now isn't working at all. And so we have to recognize ways to fix that border issue right away and to make sure this illegal immigration stops. Number two, instead of defending the entire world, how about we focus on defending America first? A reorientation of our military to make sure that American interests are at stake and not so many people across the world. Third, restore the rule of law. Look, right now, nobody trusts the FBI.
Why would they?
I don't know anybody who does. It seems to me that the law has been weaponized in many instances to go after conservatives. Look, there has to be a restoration of the rule of law. If we don't have faith in those institutions, it begs the question, how much longer can the country survive as a whole? Mm-hmm. And so a nice purging of the Justice Department might be in order, but also a reestablishment of things that matter. In other words, we already have too many laws and too many arbitrary prosecutions. How about we work on things that really do matter? I saw where Judge Judy had a comment about the Trump prosecution the other day. You know, Trump found guilty on 34 counts, and she lives there in Manhattan, evidently. And she made the point, which I thought was based in common sense, even though she's a Democrat. She said she would much rather prefer that time and effort and money been spent to actually stop crime in New York streets that she has to walk on, as opposed to chasing Donald Trump. It's a great point, because the criminals are running like lunatics in the Northeast right now, and the administration doesn't seem to want to do anything to stop that. So a restoration of the rule of law would go a long way. I think our military needs to be rebuilt in a new and different way to prepare for 21st century threats. I think our economy needs regenerizing to find energy for the first time ever. And I think you do that, first time in many years, you do that to a large extent by making sure the taxes are reduced and you give people more of their hard-earned money. That would go a long way to energizing the economy right now. Energy, independence, better roads and bridges, better infrastructure. We need to make sure that free speech is protected. These are hard, clear, objective items they could be working on, but they're not. And by the way, that same poll I saw earlier from Gallup indicated that more Democrats than ever before are willing to curb freedom of expression and speech so long as the, quote, real truth gets out.
That's frightening.
It's frightening because the real truth is subjective. We all disagree as to what the truth is. You can't stifle speech. Even speech you find objectionable. You may hate this show. We have a right to say it. I may hate your show. You have a right to say it. I think the government could go a long way to re-emphasizing those truths. Also, a reorientation of education. My goodness, education is broken.
Let's start with the abolishment of the Department of Education on a national level, because it's major part of the problem.
I think the theme of this show is everything the federal government touches collapses, and education is a great example of that. So we need to find ways to reorientate education. And then lastly, unity. You know, I count me a pessimist among this last item, because it just seems to me that the Democrats have drifted so far away. It's going to be difficult to unify under the same umbrella. Now, if we can do it, I think that's the preference, but can it be done as hard as they're pushing? And if this data is accurate, and I believe that it is accurate about Gallup and how hard they're going to the left, where do we, in the next 20 years, I'm not sure.
I don't see where there is a middle ground. When you look at everything that you covered in those polls, in that Gallup poll, I don't see where there's a common ground. I don't see where there's a point where I can find something I'm willing to give up that they're wanting, because they are radically insane, in my opinion. They've gone off the deep end, and I'm not willing to give up my freedom. When you're talking about taking away freedom of speech, it's okay as long as the truth. Who determines what the truth is?
Well, it's almost impossible, but more specifically to the sickness that happens to come with authoritarianism from any front, is that you look at the First Amendment to the Constitution, it seems pretty clear.
Yes.
Just like the Second Amendment seems pretty clear. But you give a liberal judge 15 minutes and a dry erase board, he'll create a new amendment.
Yep.
And that's the danger, because if you believe in this concept of a living constitution, the all rights, as understood, are not absolute. And they're subject to change based on the evolving needs of a new, more civilized society, is something Justice Kennedy might have said. So we find ourselves in a position of recognizing that the Supreme Court and these federal courts are incredibly instrumental, and that even though you have the black and white protections in the federal Constitution, if a judge wants to erase those, according to their interpretation, the way the liberals view the document, then that's something that we have to be very aware of. Now, with that said, one more issue before I go over the Supreme Court's docket, because the Supreme Court has about 6 or 7 cases coming out this week that are going to be transformational. I never thought I'd see the day. All of our hopes and dreams. Basically, it was the United States Supreme Court.
Well, you know the politicians aren't going to do it because it removes a voting issue from them. So when they run for re-election, they don't have that anymore to throw out.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that, because these really are interesting decisions. And look, being an attorney and being a constitutional lawyer, I think these are cool. Now, you're going to think they're boring, but I promise you it's going to impact your life one way or the other over the next week. So you've got several of these decisions, one of which deals with administrative state power. That's administrative agencies the federal government has, okay? EPA, you know the laundry list, all of these organizations and entities that speak on behalf of you without actually having any power given to them by you. Basically, Congress creates these agencies and they hand them authority. There's a ruling from 1984 called the Chevron ruling. And what this means is courts are instructed to defer to any reasonable agency interpretation of a law which the agency believes is ambiguous. So, Congress passes a law and it says X, Y, and Z. Some pinhead at an agency looks at that law, considers it somehow not clear, and then he interprets the law. It's been like that since 1984. And so what happens is you've got these underlings that are below the political process. In other words, they can't be replaced. They can't be challenged. And they're passing laws because they have the power of law based on subjective interpretations of what they believe the language should say. And this case was bought by a couple of fishermen, some fishing companies. To get this, they sued the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, another one of those acronym federal agencies, because willy-nilly they implemented a rule that required the fishermen to pay $700 a day to cover the salaries of federally mandated onboard observers. So you have a private business, and it's not in the law. And some pinhead at an agency says, well, we're going to put somebody on there, and it's going to charge you $700 a day. And you think, well, how could that happen? It happens every day in 1,000 different areas. So if the court now reverses Chevron, we have more strength than ever before to start cleaning up some of these bad agency decisions. Now, again, I know that's boring. It's not abortion, and it's not guns, but it goes right to the heart of self-government. Chevron can be reversed, and a new day can be born. Number two, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Biden administration actually worked hand in hand with social media companies to encourage them to censor conservative thought.
I did know that, yes.
And it's a really fascinating argument. There's a case right now, Murphy versus Missouri, and the Supreme Court's going to rule on that this week. Now, this is why this is really interesting, because as a general, this is going to shock you. What if I told you that if you work at a place, I mean, give me a fictional office structure. All right, let's say you work for the Chicago Cubs.
All right.
And the Chicago Cubs, being a private entity, told you that there are certain things you can't say. Private entity. Mm-hmm. What if they told you there's a certain way you must dress? Okay, you would say that's offensive. That violates my constitutional rights. Well, there has to be a state actor for your constitutional rights to be violated. Some government actor. The Cubs aren't a government actor, so they can circumvent and circumscribe your rights all day, every day, for the most part, unless they're protected under other federal provisions. You know, race, religion, things of that nature, right? Okay, so here we have a situation here that if the Supreme Court does somehow indicate that state action was a part of the decision to censor, ooh.
Trouble.
Look out, Facebook. Look out, Twitter. I guess X now. But they're not censored anymore, are they?
I don't think so. At least not as much.
The point is, if somehow the Supreme Court ties in state action to these private actors and finds a constitutional violation based on censorship, it could open the floodgates. I doubt the court would go that far because they're so sensitive to those floodgates being opened. But wow.
It's interesting.
Definitely be interesting. And I know that's incredibly boring, but remember all those posts you guys made during COVID-19 when you were attacking the shots and then you saw your algorithm just get turned down? Remember that?
I do.
That was in large part because the Biden administration encouraged the social media companies to turn down your post. Question is that enough action for state action, opening up the possibility of a constitutional violation?
It's very fast, and as somebody who has his own podcast that I use social media to promote the right side on, it's very fast because I have definitely seen my numbers go down, and I know it's because somebody's tweaking the algorithm, so I know what's happening there, and I guarantee you it's happening to this show, it's happening to other conservative content, so I'll definitely be keeping it close. I didn't find that boring at all. I'm intrigued to see what happens with that.
Yeah, here's another one. A lot of the January 6th defendants, and again, these decisions are all coming down, we think, this week. Remember January 6th?
Yes.
The liberals claim it was an insurrection. You don't talk about.
Yeah, just a dust up. Right?
Well, the federal prosecutors, like they always do, decide to go a step too far. And it's not bad enough they charge you for X, Y, and Z. They have to charge you for every other thing they can find under the books. What they did is they used a statute, Section 1512C2. And what that does is anyone that basically obstructs, influences, or impedes an official proceeding, broad language, it's a felony. Subject to 20 years of a penalty. The problem is the statute was written for criminal violations with businesses, okay, paperwork violations. So these prosecutors, they found this vague language. Now they're trying to apply it to these January 6 protesters. So now you don't get 1 year, you get 21 years. And they took it to the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court's going to reverse that ruling. And I think they're going to make it clear that you can't be charged if you're a January 6th protester for obstructing or influencing this official proceeding that has nothing to do with businesses. It's just, anyway, we'll get to that.
It's a game they're playing.
Always. They always overcharge. And the poor people, whoever's been indicted, has to have the entire weight of the world against them, and it makes it almost impossible to defend. I mean, what if you got a multi-count indictment and you were facing 36 years in a federal penitentiary? The first thing you would have to do, one would think, is to hire a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And that criminal defense lawyer is going to charge you $350 an hour at a minimum, isn't he?
Well, no, I'm hiring you.
I'm not doing this. Trust me, it's $500 an hour. If you tell you that, there's no way I'm defending you. It's a losing case.
Look, I'm hiring you.
The point is, if you hired somebody, clearly not me, and it was somebody that did criminal defense work, and it's $350 an hour. How many hours can you afford? I mean, seriously. And so you have the entire weight of the world on your shoulders. You're mortgaging your home. You're selling your four-wheelers. You're doing everything you can just to pay your legal fee. How's that? That's not a fair system.
No, it's not.
And these people are facing that with these overzealous federal prosecutors, and they don't have the money or the means to defend. So what do? They plea.
Yeah.
They cop a plea. It's terrifying. So now instead of spending 31 years, you get to spend 3 for something you may not have even done because you were too frightened to try to defend it, because you were too poor to hire lawyers to defend it. And I realize there are criminal defense lawyers that can be appointed for your defense, but many of those really don't give a great defense.
Yeah, because they're just
do.
appointed.
Some do.
Yeah,
some do. I don't mean to impugn the entire profession, but many just don't do the most sound job. Okay, so enough of that. Another case, getting close to the end today. Another case here, Idaho. Now this is fascinating because remember the Dobbs decision that basically overturned Roe?
I do.
And everyone went crazy, even though it was just returning the issues back to the states where the issues had always belonged.
That's all it did.
That's all it did, nothing to see here. It turns out that Idaho has a pretty extensive abortion ban. And so the Department of Justice, again, the federal prosecutors, you got to love these guys, they decided to sue Idaho over its Defense of Life Act. Really clever lawsuit here. What they did is they argued, the Department of Justice argued, that the pro-life law prevents emergency room doctors from performing abortions necessary under the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment Act. EMTALA. Now, they're going to lose. They're going to lose. But again, Department of Justice, playing politics. They sue a state that has every right to pass that law and try to claim that a federal law somehow is going to supersede the state law because apparently these doctors can't provide stabilizing care. Well, of course they can provide stabilizing care. And if a woman's life is in danger pursuant to the Idaho law, there's nothing wrong with the doctor exercising that care. In fact, they may not have standing under those circumstances. We'll find out, though, in just a few days. So many more here, too. President Trump's immunity case. That's going to be the one that shocks the world because it's actually more complicated than it seems at first glance. You know, you think no person has complete immunity for anything they do. That's not really the test. The press has mishandled the way they've reported this case.
Intentionally.
I think so. But presidents are typically granted some immunity for official acts, right? If you don't have some immunity for official acts, then every official act you take gets you sued. X, Y, and Z, right? So I think the Supreme Court, they will extend some moderate degree of immunity, but it won't be complete or full immunity. And the decisions could be all over the place. I know, as Justice Alito said, this is a decision for the ages. It's a big deal because it's one of the first times the court's ever ruled on an executive having this type of authority under these circumstances. It is the first time they've ruled like that. And so they have to fashion a rule that applies. You got 9 justices with varying viewpoints. You may see several concurring opinions, several dissenting opinions, but at the very least, I think you're going to see a 5-4, maybe a 6-3 block that does provide some marginal degree of immunity. Will it be enough? That's the question. It may not go quite as far as the Trump lawyers want them to, because I thought the arguments seemingly to indicate that, you know, a president could order an execution of a political rival would be okay. That's nonsense. Presidents aren't above the law.
No.
Even presidents we love, they're not above the law. So the court's going to have an interesting dilemma on their hands as to how to balance all of those factors. That's coming out probably this week. So more cool things that we can talk about next week on the decisions that are happening this week.
Well, Chris, you know, it's fascinating when you look at these decisions and the ones that are coming down the pipeline and ones that we're expecting. And no matter what the rulings come out to be, we already know how the media is going to spin it. It may be a mild agreement with our argument, and it's probably going to be firmly based in the law, but what the left's going to come out is they're going to continue to tell us that this court is radicalized. They have ignored the true radicalization of the Supreme Court for so long when it was serving their duty. Now we actually have strict constitutionalists in the majority in the Supreme Court. So it's not a radicalized court. It was radicalized for years, and now we're starting to see folks actually go back and look at the law and look at reasons for why they're ruling this way, and the media and the left are just trying to tell lies about how radicalized
it's not radicalization from any perspective. Basically, it's the way we view the Constitution, the way we interpret the document. They don't have the value of the written words. They don't value the written words. Of course, if that's the kind of government you want, then I suppose an oligarchy would be your choice, or maybe suppose an unelected bureaucrats could rule your life. That's not the government we have in this country. The government we have in this country is the people and by the people, which means they have to be subject, the so-called representatives have to be subject to some degree of control by us or removal by us. The Supreme Court is appointed for a lifetime. And so the question for them is, how do you interpret a document? To me, it's pretty simple. You start with the words, right? You start with the words. And then you try to understand what those words mean based on what they would have meant at the time they were adopted. That's called originalism. How do the liberals view it? That's whatever they say it is.
Yeah.
But how's that freedom? I mean, now you're getting me sideways. Because
that's the point.
Now, wait a second. I've been hearing about these people defending democracy for the last 10 years. And now we're fighting for democracy. And now this is a democracy, and blah, 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 blah. And yet the very Supreme Court they wish they had is the most anti-democratic institution known to man.
Yep.
An institution untouchable by the people. An institution that ignores plain laws and writes their own. That's authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Do they teach this stuff anymore, or these young people just don't care? Are they just saying the word democracy because they don't understand the term?
I don't think they understand the term. Now,
I think I know what they think it is. Whatever they want.
Yeah, because that's what they're being told.
I think it's whatever they want.
That's what they're being told. They're told if you want to do it and it makes you feel good, do it. They're not being taught anything in the schools about the Constitution.
Yeah, right.
It's sad that we're losing the country based on what's happening in the classrooms.
Well, you're talking about classrooms, and that brings up, I guess, one of the last subjects of today. Unless, of course, you're going to put on the rhino mask. If you want to do that, I'm fine with that too.
I think I like the story idea.
Okay. All right. Student loan forgiveness.
Oh, goodness.
Now, look, we've all heard the arguments, but there's a practical, real-world problem occurring here outside of the arguments. And the arguments go something like this, and I think I can speak to that because I had student loans, and I paid my student loans back. Mm-hmm. I guess I should have waited.
You definitely should have.
I guess I shouldn't have been responsible. I guess I could have bought a car with that, maybe a new house, and said, forget it. I'm not going to pay it. And then hopefully Biden gets elected and he lets me off the hook.
Yeah.
The problem is, it's not money that evaporates. It doesn't just disappear. The money is still owed.
Yeah.
You can claim it's not owed by you, but it's still owed by somebody.
Yep.
So the CBO today forecasts now the jump in the federal debt, just on that one action taken by Biden. That's $400 billion.
Oh, wow.
$400 billion.
Wow.
And again, it's political, it's crass. These young people, of course they want their bills paid. Well, why stop there, Joe? I mean, why stop there? Can't you pay for a subway ride too, or maybe a free cell phone? Oh, you're already doing that.
Yeah, the free cell phone happens.
I mean, cell phones are needed.
Yeah.
What about car notes?
They can pay mine.
I mean, look, in fairness, if I'm just out of college and I get that BMW I've always wanted, and the note's $1,500 a month, but I only make $2,000, it's really putting a damper on my ability to live.
The Democrats should help you out with that. And with my tax dollars, they should 100% help.
The problem is, it might be good politics for the Democrats, but it is absolute nonsense, and it's not fair to everyone else. And let me use the extreme example we've always talked about. You're telling me, if I go to law school, and I did, and I run up these massive amounts of debt, and you're arguing now that some of that can be forgiven, and yet the people that are going to be paying it are the very ones that went out to work and were dedicated to blue-collar lifestyles and actually make this country work. Why should they be responsible for my debt?
They shouldn't.
It's outrageous. Worse yet, say I major in 13th century women's studies, for goodness sakes, and I have a degree that makes me effectively unemployable. Well, whose fault is that?
That would be your fault.
It's mind-boggling because, look, I'm not suggesting that college is for everybody. In fact, I would argue that it's not. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to incur that debt. There's a lot of great jobs you can do without college and be incredibly successful. But if you go and you choose a major that for whatever reason, now I know it's not fair. It's not fair. I should be able to major in Crayola art forms and still make $100,000 a year because I'm an artist. That's not accurate. You have to find something that works in the world you've been given. If you want to recreate the world, you can, but do it on your own dime, not the taxpayer's dime, right?
Yes.
The point I'm making is, if you're going to major in something that can make you some money.
Yep.
Otherwise, shut up. Nobody made you take a look. I'm the world's worst because I had a couple of majors in college, both completely and utterly useless. But for law school, let's just say I didn't get into law school. You think my English major, my social science major is going to pay the bills?
Not really.
I'm broker than broke can be. But it's still, I'm not going to ask the government to bail me out. I'm going to try to, maybe I'll write a book, Jack. I don't know. The point is that I knew I was going to be broke as broke could be unless I got the professional degree, right?
Yeah.
So, look, I'm not trying to bust people up. I'm just trying to point out that it's not fair to just reassign the burden of that debt to people that didn't sign up for that debt. That's just not fair. Now, granted, some of the terms you signed up for, not fair.
Yeah.
But you signed it.
Yeah.
You signed it.
And that's the thing. If you want to talk about ways to fix the student loan issue, it's not just blanket washing away debt, because that doesn't work. As you pointed out, that's adding to our deficit. You need to look at some of the predatory lenders that are jacking stuff up. You need to go to those college campuses, tell them quit raising tuition every bloody year.
What do you think causes the increase in tuition? It's a lot of federal money flying into the system, and it's look, that's for another show.
Yeah.
But let me just suggest something to you, and go look it up, go Google it. Whenever you subsidize something with an outward source of income or money, you always drive up the cost.
Yep.
Rule of Economics 101, same in education. Okay, so whenever you federally subsidize something, you're going to drive up the cost. That's what's happening, and you make it unaffordable. But more importantly, perhaps before you get a contract, before you sign a contract, you should read it.
Absolutely.
And I'm not suggesting that we pass laws that hinder people's ability to give loans. I'm suggesting that before you sign that loan, you have to be a reasonable, functioning human being. And who knows, maybe 18 is too young for that. I hate to think that, because if we can send somebody to war and they can die for their country at 18, they should be able to sign a contract. But also, if you sign for that contract, you have a residual responsibility to live up to it, to do the right thing. And I get it may be good politics, but we added $400 billion to the debt.
It won't be good politics here in the very short future.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. It turns out the old adage is accurate when it comes to the Democrats. If you don't have the policies, you can always buy votes.
That's true.
And they've been buying them for a generation. And there's a reason we have so much debt. It's not just the Democrats' fault. Republicans buy votes too.
Yep.
No, we just buy from our corporate masters as opposed to others.
Fair. Yeah.
Am I lying about that?
No, you are not.
Okay, so both parties are guilty of this nonsense. And at some point, some average American's going to have to step up and say, you know what? It doesn't have to be a politician. It doesn't have to be anybody special. Common sense approach to these things. And the best common sense approach I could think of at this stage in this country's history is to reduce the size and scope of that federal government and let people govern themselves. Quit telling us how to live our lives. Quit fighting over Washington, D.C. I don't want Republicans dictating to people. I don't want Democrats dictating to people. I want freedom to be what we're all after. Now, that freedom means economic freedom as well, which means I shouldn't have to pay for your student loan. But conversely, live your life. Enjoy your life. I'm going to live mine. That's America, isn't it?
It is.
Used to be.
Supposed to be.
Used to be. We'll see what happens. Another episode of Chris McDaniel's America on the Midnight Ride Network, the home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. Hopefully, we can instill some common sense back.
Hey, and welcome back. It's nice for me to be back in my proper chair and give you your chair back this week. So.
Well, we've gone from 3 listeners to 6. So
that's amazing.
Double to 5, so 100% increase in our listening capacity today. So, but I do appreciate you filling in last week. All right, guys, thanks for being here. We'll catch you next time.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new MyPillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit mypillow.com.